Hello. Let us start talking a bit more about blueprints. Now, first, I will just open up my player one and go to the event graph. Now, I'll talk a bit more about the kind of variables we can deal with. Now, you'll see by default, we have our components, which can be used as variables as well. For example, one really common one that we can use is maybe the mesh itself. So to drag it in and click on get, and now we get the reference to our cylinder here. So maybe something we can do, which we probably will do for enemies and such, is to set material. And that'll just let us change our material. And usually our references, we would have to plug it to the target. Now, aside from that, we have a lot of other basic variables. So let us add a few. Let me just delete this as well. The first one is a Boolean. The second one can be an integer, a float, I guess a name, a string, a vector, as well as an object reference. But for now, I won't talk about the object reference actually, as well as maybe a transform. Now I'll just call this test underscore boolean. Let me just rename all of these real quick. Okay, so let us talk about our first one. So when we drag a variable in, we can either get them or we can set them. Now, depending on what you need, these two are something that you'll use really often. And whenever you have a Boolean variable, something that you'll definitely really use is a branch. So if I were to left click while holding B, I can create a branch. And you can think of branch as an if statement, and the Boolean is whether it is true or false. So make sure that whenever you make a variable that you hit compile so that you can see the default value. So you would have to plug the Boolean reference into our condition, and different code will run depending on whether the Boolean is true or false. So maybe for now, I'll plug this into our begin play right after the mapping context. And now, if it's true, let us try having two different print strings. Over here, we can say true, and over here, we can say false. Now, I'll plug these two in, and you'll see by default it is unchecked, so it's going to be false. So let us hit compile and try playing, and you'll see that it is false. If I were to just set the default to true, then you'll see that it says true. Now, this is a really gross simplification of everything because we are going to be using it in many different ways, but that's basically how Booleans work. Now, for our integer and float, deals with numbers. Now, our integer deals with whole numbers like 1, 2, 3, and our float deals with decimals. For example, one thing that we would really use a float for is for setting the percentages of our player health. For example, maybe our player health can be 45.6%, and our integer, which is a whole number, we can probably deal with things like our player level or, how much experience it has or how many enemies you have killed. Now, these are the ones that I'm going to talk about at first, but there really are a lot of variables that you can use. And as well, you can even have our blueprint actors as a variable as well. For example, we have the BP pickup, so I can even just type in the name of our actor, and you'll see there's one called BP underscore pickup. So yeah, sometimes you would need to have references to an actual actor. Aside from our bool and float, we also have our name as well as our string. So I believe for our name, I would usually use this to identify I would usually use it to identify something. One really common thing I would use it for is to switch on name. So we would have our name input, and depending on what input we have, for example, maybe this would be called green, well, copper, silver or gold, etc. So you can say that maybe if our name is copper, then it'll run whatever is copper. And if it's silver, then it'll run like that. Now, string is pretty similar. You can put any alphanumeric character. And now we can talk about our vectors. So our vector usually deals with 3 different values. And if you haven't noticed, we have been playing with them quite a lot. So for example, when we have to move, rotate, or scale something, then we would deal with the x, y, and z value, which is something that the vector has. Sometimes you would need to save a vector value. For example, we can save the starting location of a pickup, or we can save the location of a player or something. And this can be really versatile, and we'll definitely be using this quite a lot. And our transform is basically storing the location, rotation, and scale all at the same time. Now, I definitely don't really use this in this course, I believe, but I can see how it can be super useful. So let me just remove it for now. So probably these ones are going to be the most important variables that we will use. Let's start creating our first logic. I'm going to start by just deleting all of this, and let us create a new blueprint for our pickup, which is this one. And now we have to add in a static mesh. So make sure that we add in the coin. So for this one, I'll call this mesh_coin. And for the static mesh, let us drag and drop our mesh coin in here. And for the elements, let's just make sure to drag in the right ones. So let me just check what I did for this. So the first one was gold and the second one was brown. So this material instance as well as this one. And let us see how it looks in the viewport. So yeah, it looks pretty all right. Now we can start creating a component that will let us interact with a player. Go into add and we can create a collision. So a sphere collision is more than good enough. And you'll see that it is a bit small. I think we also do need to scale our coin a bit smaller. So maybe around 0.3, just so that it is relatively a good size compared to the player. So let me just drag the pickup here and let me delete this mesh. So yeah, let's just say that we're pretty happy with this size. Now, let me just call the sphere collision sphere, I guess. And when you right click on it, you can create a on begin overlap somewhere. On component begin overlap. Yep. And now we can try to do some code where maybe if we overlap the player with the coin, then the coin will disappear. So for the other actor, we have to make sure that it is our player character. So what we can do is to just make sure to just drag this out and create our first reference caster. So we can type cast BP_player. And now this will try to get a reference out of the actor that we are interacting with. If it is the player, then we're going to get this reference. If it fails, then nothing will happen. You can think of this kind of like a branch node as well. So if it's successful, then let us delete actor or destroy actor. And yeah, we can destroy actor and the target will be self, which is the BP pickup by default. So let us try it. So now I'm going to click on play. I'm going to move and move near this. And it looks like when we collided with it, it has deleted itself. Since the sphere is so small, I literally had to go into it. But let us try with many different ones. So bum, bum, bum. And now we have created our first collision event. So that'll be pretty much it. We'll be making much more complex ones than this. But that is pretty much how we can have 2 different blueprints interact with each other. So I hope you guys are having a bit of fun and I hope things are clicking. But it's okay if it isn't, because when I first started, it was definitely hard for me to wrap my mind around it. But after a few tries, I managed to understand it slowly. So yeah, that'll be pretty much it. Thanks for following along, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.